A lot has happened in the past week, and I'm going to go over everything that's COVID related and could have COVID related impacts. So, starting off, as a reminder, I was talking about ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and I wrote down everything that I think could happen to this committee. It's a very important committee because this is the one that sets vaccine schedules, who can be eligible to receive a vaccine, and the frequency of getting those vaccines. And I wrote it out saying that I think it's going to go in one of three directions. The first one was what I stated as a worst case scenario, is that they're literally just going to keep postponing these vaccine review committees, so that what happens essentially is you get a new vaccine, the old one gets discontinued, but the new vaccine scheduling requirements haven't been set or approved yet. So basically, they're kicking the can down the road, which ends up having policy impacts because they just keep delaying. That was one scenario. The second scenario is that the newly appointed CDC director would just unilaterally decide all the vaccine schedules and frequencies themselves. The third is a potential restacking of the ACIP committee with a new board of yes men. These are all not good options. The best option, but also the least likely option, would be that this is a one-off postponement and nothing changes, but I'm very skeptical that would be the case. Now, I'm not going to go over this letter in detail, but essentially what it is, it's a letter by a bunch of prestigious scientific community members saying, hey, we really need to preserve the ACIP committee meetings because right now it is postponed indefinitely. They don't have a time when they're saying, oh yes, you're going to reschedule this meeting for this later date. We don't know. So they're basically just reiterating what I already told you, that these meetings are very important because they're giving the public transparency into what the committee is actually reviewing. They're looking at the most recent data, the most recent figures, any vaccine information that's available from the previous vaccine, and their projections for what the future threats are in terms of variants circulating in the public. And then they're also allowing for public comment, so people can do their comments, and then the committee can hear those and then take that into consideration when they're making their recommendations for the vaccines. And that is the process. And then that brings us to this article right here, where RFK Jr. is preparing to shake up vaccine advisors, where he's planning to replace members who he perceives to have a conflict of interest, as a part of widespread effort to minimize what he's criticized as the undue industry influence over the nation's health agencies. So basically, this is not good because we just got the committee up to the required number of members. They didn't have enough members. They only had like 11 members, and they're required to have 14 by their bylaws. And we just got people on there that are very pro-vaccine, pro-masking, things like that. So we just had, for example, people from National Nurses United, NNU. We just got a board member on there through a lot of sustained effort over time, and that was a very good thing. That's the type of person that could be removed as being perceived as having a conflict of interest, even though you have people on that committee, about 4 people and then 2 supplemental people, 2 people that advise the advisory committee as consultants. They wrote a paper basically saying that, oh, we want to see people's smiles, we want to get people back to public, we don't really believe in vaccines, things like that. You have people on the committee that wrote and authored a paper publicly stating those things, and that's a huge conflict of interest because they're saying that we don't believe in these things, but we're going to make judgments on them. So, like, he's not going to be removing those types of people. He's going to be removing people that don't suit his agenda. So this is just a ploy. It might sound good if you're just reading the language, but it certainly is not good. So as I predicted over a week ago, he is pursuing at least this option and considering this option of replacing people in the committee with yes men to Trump and his agenda to try and mitigate vaccines, to reduce people's access and availability to them. And also, I should mention in this article down here, it says that delays to the ACIP processes and recommendations can prevent access to FDA-approved vaccines, putting people at risk from preventable diseases, exactly as I was stating. So that could also play into the kick the can down the road thing, so that you have these new vaccines available, which automatically discontinues the prior vaccine, putting you in this state of limbo, so that you have the new vaccine, but people can't get the vaccine because the recommendations haven't been set yet. Now, the next major move by RFK Jr. is this move to eliminate public comment on HHS decisions. So this is our federal registrar, so how we've been commenting on things like VRBPAC and the ACIP committee meetings, among others. These are things that we would no longer be able to comment on, and that's a big problem. Like, first, this is anti-democratic because people should always have a say in the laws that are being enacted upon them. Because normally, before issuing a new rule or regulation, the public is given an opportunity to submit written comments in support or in opposition to government proposals. This gives a transparency function. The government says, hey, this is what we're proposing to do. People can comment on it, and then the government and the committee members review it, and then they make their rulings and usually make some modifications to the proposed language or the proposed rule. So why is this a problem? Well, we've had very distinct instances where dramatic public outcry has caused a new thing to be squashed. So this is why we've continued to have 6 months and older for COVID vaccines, is because each time we have people showing up saying, hey, we really need this to be universally available for everybody. Everyone needs access to these vaccines. And this is why we have vaccine access for everybody, instead of just having it for just the elderly or just the immunocompromised, because people have been showing up and fighting for this. Now, what will happen if this policy is actually implemented? It would mean that the Human Health Services can simply just announce changes. They can just say, this is what we're doing, and no one can try and go against that. That's just the rule. That's essentially an oligarchy. That's essentially an autocracy where they're just saying, this is how it is. This is what's going to happen, as opposed to having a democratic process. This is not good. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, this guy's just overreacting, but what we're looking at is a pattern of behaviors and also the history of this man, RFK Jr. So what's very likely to happen is that he is either going to try to create a ban for all Americans for the COVID vaccine, or he's going to try to limit it to very specific age groups so that only a very limited subsection of people actually get the vaccine. So either way, it's not good. People are going to lose access to this vaccine. This is because RFK and other experts are at these high levels in the US government saying that, oh, these vaccines are causing widespread side effects and deaths. I saw some articles going around the other day. Let me try and find one. Here we go. So it's all this fake information about quote unquote COVID vaccine syndrome, and then all these other false reports of vaccine lung injury and things like that. Let's dive into this just because it's really silly. The claim is that COVID vaccines are triggering brain fog, tinnitus, and dizziness, but none of the studies have actually shown this. What's actually happening is people are getting COVID and they're getting infected with COVID, and then that's triggering long COVID. And these are the side effects of repeated COVID infections. So people are misclassifying, oh, I got a vaccine, so it must be this COVID vaccine syndrome that they're making up. This is misinformation. But what's actually happening is people are getting infected over and over again. They're not wearing masks. They're just letting it happen, and then they're getting these side effects, and they're going, well, it must have been this one thing I got, instead of saying like, oh, well, I've been repeatedly exposed to this virus. We know from the literature, huge sections of the literature, just go to any of my playlists, that it causes brain fog, it causes tinnitus, it causes dizziness, it causes MECFS, it causes POTS, it causes all these different things, and they're not putting the actual 2 and 2 together. They're putting 4 and 5 together and getting 2. The wrong answer. Now, moving outside of the ACIP committee, other things that have happened this past week is this executive order here called Commencing the Reduction of the Federal Bureaucracy. And in this, all the way down here at number 4, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall terminate the Secretary's Advisory Committee on Long COVID. So this is something that Bernie Sanders was chairing and something that actually got pushed forward and was allocated like millions of dollars to start directly funding research into long COVID and treatments and cures for long COVID. So they're terminating that now. Additionally, as I was emphasizing last week, the biggest impact on these funding cuts is going to be in early career researchers. So this is going to be undergrad students trying to get a position in a research lab. This is going to be graduate students and postdoc students that are working in labs, that all of their funding is tied up in these grant dollars. That's what pays for their salaries. And as we're seeing here, scores of young researchers were affected after the country's main federal funding agencies, the NIH and the NSF, canceled programs that were judged to be in violation of Trump's 21 January executive orders banning dangerous, demeaning, and immoral race and sex-based preferences under the guise of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion, where a lot of these grant dollars were meant to support the salaries and career development of trainees from underrepresented groups. And not only that, but a lot of this funding was also awards given directly to graduate students and postdocs who proposed as part of the research or through outreach to help broaden the participation of underrepresented groups in STEM fields. And then this is a pretty poignant quote from a federal scientist that was fired early this month that was also early in their career. They said, "I feel like I was robbed of a career, that they had envisioned this being their last job, one they would have been in for 20 years or more. Additionally, they're not optimistic about an already competitive job market that is going to be flooded with qualified students, because now we already had a really competitive, tough job market. It took me like 8-9 months to get a position after getting laid off, and that was a long time. I'm highly qualified. And now you have even more competition flooding into the marketplace from all these layoffs. So you have people with all of this vast knowledge and experience now oversaturating the market. It's going to be even harder for entry-level people to get a position, because people that are just going to be trying to grab whatever job they can might be going down a couple positions from what they're actually qualified for so that they can fill these slots because they just need pay." Now, making matters worse is that the NIH is again throttling research funding in defiance of a federal court order. So 22 states came together and issued a temporary restraining order on January 31st, which prevented the Trump administration from freezing these funds. And with this temporary restraining order in place, the officials wrote that they therefore grant management staff to proceed with issuing awards for all grants. This still is not happening. And to make matters worse, the NIH is also placing a ban on renewing senior scientists in their positions, where the new mandate is that the agency cannot retain scientists in 1-year to 4-year positions that have long been routinely renewed, and that for scientists that reach their renewal date this week or within this coming time period, they're going to be placed on administrative leave without pay, where the impact is that there are entire branches of the NIH that would be gutted within 6 months because so many principal investigators are coming up for renewal. Also in limbo in this ruling is the Intramural Program's trainee program, which is a post-baccalaureate program. So this is people that just got out of college. And this program employs some 1,600 recent college grads and is key to staffing many labs and launching the careers of young scientists. So again, this is another impact to young science professionals in their early careers. So overall, it's looking like public health is continuing to be gutted. And this is not a great update, but this is everything that's happened, which is a lot in the past week.